Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to unpack one of the absolute wildest, most incredible stories of human endurance in recorded history. We're looking closely at the true events of Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571. You've probably heard it called the Miracle of the Andes. We're going to use the facts and timelines from our source material to really dig into the mechanics of how this even happened. Because, this isn't just a story about a plane crash. It's a deep dive into the absolute limits of human physical and mental resilience.
So, let's just jump right into this totally impossible scenario. Seriously, how exactly do you survive 72 days in a frozen hell? Well, we're going to figure out exactly how a group of stranded young rugby players managed to defy the ultimate odds. We're breaking down their brutal environment, the impossible, gut-wrenching choices they had to make, and the sheer force of will that finally brought them home.
All right, let's start with Section 1, Flight 571, into the Andes.
We really have to start by looking at how fast this tragedy escalated, setting the stage for everything that came next. So it's October 12, 1972. A 22-year-old rugby player named Nando Parrado boards a small turboprop plane in Montevideo, Uruguay. He's with his teammates, their families, friends, and they're all heading to Santiago, Chile for a fun, friendly rugby match. 45 passengers and crew in total. But then, the very next day, October 13th, turbulent weather and a fatal pilot miscalculation dropped them directly into the remote, frozen heart of the Andes Mountains. At about 3:30 p.m., they strike a mountain peak. And then just 8 days later, on October 21st, because search planes literally couldn't spot the white wreckage against the snow, the rescue was called off. That was it. That was the devastating moment they realized they were completely and utterly alone.
When the plane actually hit that peak, the tail sheared completely off. The rest of the fuselage then slid down a glacier at a terrifying 350 kilometers per hour. I mean, just imagine the sheer, violent momentum of that. 350 kilometers per hour before the broken aircraft finally just slammed into a snowbank.
Right off the bat, out of the 45 people on that flight, 19 passengers died instantly in the crash. Nando Parrado actually spent 3 days in a coma with a severe skull fracture, and when he finally woke up, his whole world had just turned totally white and silent. His mother lay dead right beside him, and his sister Susana was critically injured. Suddenly, there were only 27 survivors left in this absolutely brutal environment.
Moving on to Section 2, Surviving the Frozen White.
Think about the sheer mismatch here. On one hand, you have these vulnerable passengers equipped for a mild spring day. They have no winter clothing, absolutely zero mountaineering gear, and almost no food. Plus, their radios are completely destroyed. And on the other hand, you have the unforgiving reality of the Andes. They are stranded at 3,600 meters in altitude, with temperatures plummeting to negative 30 degrees Celsius at night, completely surrounded by invisible whiteout conditions. It wasn't just an unequal fight, it was practically a death sentence.
Staring down certain starvation, they had to take some incredibly desperate steps just to stay alive. Step 1, they figured out how to melt snow for drinking water. Step 2, they strictly rationed what little they had left, basically just a few chocolate bars and drops of wine, which obviously only lasted a few days. And then there was literally nothing, just the frozen bodies of their friends outside. Which brings us to Step 3. Facing absolute certain death, the survivors made a solemn, truly agonizing decision. They would consume the flesh of the deceased to stay alive. It was a choice born entirely out of the primal need to survive, an act of sheer desperation that, haunted them forever, but it is what kept them breathing.
Let's look at Section 3, the deadly avalanche.
You'd think, right, that after adapting to all of that, they had endured the absolute worst the world could throw at them. But no. The mountain delivered a second massive blow. On October 29th, a catastrophic avalanche swept down and completely buried the fuselage. They were buried alive inside this dark, freezing wreckage for 3 agonizing days before they could finally dig themselves out.
That disaster claimed 8 more lives, violently and in an instant. We are down to just 19 people left alive on that mountain.
As you can imagine, morale was just completely shattered at this point. But then, a pivotal shift happens. Nando Parrado looks at his dying sister, Susana. She would actually pass away days later, but before she did, he made her a promise. He promised he would walk out of those mountains and bring rescue. Her death just seemed to completely harden his resolve. That single promise flipped their whole strategy from passive endurance, just sitting around waiting for a rescue that wasn't coming, into an active, unbreakable quest for salvation.
Which brings us to Section 4, the impossible 10-day trek.
This is really the climax of our explainer. A desperate, honestly, seemingly suicidal march across some of the deadliest terrain on planet Earth. This 10-day trek defied literally every known rule of mountain survival. On December 12th, Parrado, Roberto Canessa, and Antonio Vizintin set out. Just look at the comparison of what they needed versus what they actually had. You need ropes, crampons, serious mountaineering boots, and heavy survival experience. They had absolutely none of that. They were rugby players. Yet, the terrain ahead was 60 kilometers of treacherous peaks reaching over 5,000 meters. Parrado, a guy who a couple months prior could barely stand from a skull fracture, was now trying to scale the Andes in street shoes.
There's this one specific moment that really anchors the sheer terror of this journey for me. While navigating this completely unforgiving terrain, Parrado threw a rock onto what he thought was solid ground. When the ice cracked, he wept. He realized right then that he was walking blindly over a lethal frozen glacier, and one single wrong step meant falling through the ice to an instant death. They were literally walking on a knife's edge for days on end.
Let's see how this wraps up in Section 5, The Miracle Rescue.
So how did this impossible gamble finally pay off? Well, after walking for 10 grueling days, on December 20th, Parrado and Canessa reached a raging river. On the far side, they spotted a man on horseback. Now, Parrado was way too weak to even shout over the rushing water. So what does he do? He scribbles a simple note, ties it to a rock, and throws it across the river. That man read it and rode for help. On December 22nd, the first helicopters reached the valley. And on December 23rd, 1972, exactly 72 days after they fell out of the sky, the final remaining survivors were pulled from the mountain. From the original 45 people who boarded that flight, full of excitement and life, only 16 individuals walked away from the mountain.
Nando Parrado became the undeniable leader of the Miracle of the Andes. And his own words perfectly capture the core takeaway here. He said, "I will never understand why I survived, but I know this. I survived because I refused to give up. I walked out of hell because I believed I could." This wasn't just a story of getting lucky, right? It was a massive testament to sheer, stubborn, unbreakable human willpower. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. When literally everything is stripped away, the food, the warmth, the tools, and even hope, when you are faced with absolute zero, what is it deep down inside the human spirit that creates that sheer will to survive? The Miracle of the Andes really forces all of us to question the limits of our own endurance and what we might actually be capable of if we absolutely refuse to give up. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible depths of human history. See you next time.